and welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. I'm Somi Sorang with our panel of foreign journalists. Welcome to the program. Now, with the two Koreas kicking off their high-level talks in preparation for the upcoming Inter-Korean summit, neighboring countries are zooming in on the summit's agenda. So which countries and regional powers do you think will be most affected by the Moon Kim summit?
Obviously, the original six parties in the six-party talks are going to be key in this. Obviously, China has really gotten in the diplomatic game this past week with the Xi-Kim summit, which was quite a surprise to not only the U.S., but the rest of the world, that Kim Jong-un had left his home of Pyongyang for the first time in what we believe since he became
taking office,
leader of North Korea.
Yeah.
From Japan's perspective, if the result is good, then it's very welcome. But if it ends up in as a halfway job, like they agreed to abandon their nuclear program, but they still keep their nuclear weapons and middle-range missiles, then it's much worse than right now for Japan and maybe for South Korea too. Yeah.
So it could go other ways.
From the Russian perspective, I think that summit between Kim and Chairman Xi was in line with the plan, with the roadmap that was drawn by China and Russia together for North Korean Peninsula denuclearization.
Okay. So while the two Koreas need cooperation from the neighboring countries are in turn directly affected by activities on the Korean Peninsula. So this week on Foreign Correspondents, we'll take a closer look at how the major countries invested in the two Koreas have been reacting to the potential upcoming Moon Kim summit. Countries around the world are setting their sights on the upcoming Inter-Korean summit scheduled for April 27th. Chiefly among them, regional powers such as the United States, Japan, China and Russia are watching the developments on the Korean Peninsula closely as it gears up for the upcoming summit. Washington reacted quickly by agreeing on a US-North Korea summit just 3 days after the announcement of an Inter-Korean summit.
President Trump appreciated the briefing and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May.
The Inter-Korean summit is likely to set the tone for the upcoming meeting between Trump and Kim, where discussions over denuclearization and a framework for peace may come to the fore. The success and failure of the Washington-Pyongyang summit in May could hinge closely on the outcome of the third Inter-Korean summit.
This is a comprehensive approach in support of the president, and we're continuing to move forward with those conversations.
Japan was taken aback and reacted with surprise to the Inter-Korean summit agreement. There are concerns being raised in Japan that Tokyo may have lost its role as an influential player in the developments surrounding the Korean Peninsula. In an attempt to stay relevant in the matter, the Japanese government expressed its interest in paying for the cost of nuclear inspections in North Korea by the IAEA. On the other hand, China and Russia have warmly welcomed the announcement of the Inter-Korean summit. On March 27th, a North Korean train departing from Pyongyang was spotted in Beijing, and it was revealed that Kim Jong-un had paid a surprise visit to China. During his 4-day trip to China, Kim Jong-un discussed the current situation on the Korean Peninsula with his counterpart Xi Jinping, while reaffirming his country's willingness to denuclearize. The Korean Peninsula is being closely watched by regional powers, but with divergent interests and political calculations in mind, their views appear to be falling out of alignment. So judging by the media coverage from your respective countries, how are they viewing the upcoming Moon Kim summit? Are they seeing it as a potentially fruitful event?
Sure. The news about the Inter-Korean summit are big in Russia, and the Russian government is quite excited about that. Everybody is expecting a breakthrough. Possibly after that, as the Russian foreign minister said, this summit could pave the way for solving the North Korean nuclear issue by diplomatic means, as Russia always insisted.
Koichi?
Yeah, it's the news about Inter-Korean summit always go to our front page of our newspaper, so Japanese people are very interested in it. And also, at first, Japanese audience and Japanese media were quite skeptical about the Inter-Korean summit. But after NIS Director So Hoon visited Japan, the atmosphere changed quite a lot.
남북관계의 진전 그리고 한반도 비핵화를 위한 변화의 움직임과 관련해서 문재인 대통령님의 리더십에 경의를 표한다고 말씀하셨습니다.
I think because his director softened style is very welcomed by Japanese government, since he used to be a spy, turned to be a professor, then went back to his old profession, and because of that he is pragmatic and also very logical. So he was not the kind of person that spreading very optimistic view. He explained very logically. So atmosphere in the Japanese government slightly changed, and it affected the Japanese media's view too.
What about the US media?
Well, the challenge for American news organizations is the velocity of news. This administration is unprecedented in so many ways, and especially at the top with these constant changes at the minister level, right, at the cabinet secretaries. And so as a result, a lot of talk about the Inter-Korean summit has been crowded out, and there's a lot of attention on the potential Trump-Kim summit. But that perhaps ignores the fact that the Inter-Korean summit is highly important to get to the next one.
Now, you briefly touched upon this already, but there have been several changes to Trump's cabinet since he took office. Most recently, he appointed a new state secretary and national security advisor. How do you think these changes will affect what goes on in the Korean Peninsula?
There's a lot of concern about now the third national security advisor for President Trump, and that would be John Bolton, because John Bolton is seen as such a hawk, and really there's some criticisms of him that say that he's never met a problem that he couldn't solve by bombing it. And so that is actually, you know, counter to a lot of the diplomatic approaches that we're seeing on the Korean Peninsula right now. But John Bolton has said, in response to questions about his hawkishness, that his job is really to present the president with all possible options, seeming to leave the door open to let this diplomatic situation play out.
All right. Now let's move on to China and Russia. So President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have undertaken steps to ensure their long-term presidency.
Вместе возьмемся за большую масштабную работу во имя России.
这次大会选举我继续担任中华人民共和国主席。
Do you think this added level of political stability will affect how they approach the North Korea issue?
I do not think that it is going to change the rules of the game. As I have already mentioned, last year Russia and China have presented the joint roadmap for solving the North Korean nuclear issue. And I think they're just going to head on with this plan. You know, last year it seemed that the plan is not going to work out when the tensions were rising. But after the new year, it looks like it's playing out.
Okay. So last Tuesday, at least you already touched upon this, last Tuesday, President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met face-to-face in what was Kim's first visit abroad since taking office. What was likely discussed between the two?
Chinese side reported that they discussed about the nuclear issue, and North Korean side didn't mention about that, so there are quite big difference. But also, I have to recall that in year 2000, Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, did exactly same thing before he met President Kim Dae-jun. And right before that, he took a trip to Beijing. So it's same kind of scheme. He has reconciled and he developed relationship with China before confronting with South Korean leader and then U.S. leader. Right. Year 2000, they were planned to meet with President Clinton in Pyongyang, right? So it's very similar.
Very similar, same protocols. Now, Pyongyang and Beijing, they're by and large seen as very close allies. Why do you think it took them so long for the two leaders to meet face to face?
Of course, because North Korea did many nuclear and missile tests, which was China asked not to.
So that was the major reason?
Yeah, that's a major reason.
Mm-hmm. What do you think was discussed between the two, Elise?
Well, we know generally what was discussed from the readouts from state media, right? From state media in North Korea and in China. The Chinese readout of the meeting does include the affirmation by Kim Jong-un that he wanted to meet with the United States, which was important because the South Koreans were the only other entity who had reported that out. From their meetings with North Korea, because North Korea hasn't said so. But China said that is something that Kim Jong-un discussed, as well as the commitment to somehow denuclearizing. But the key part of what he said was denuclearization, so long as there's kind of a parallel movement from the other side towards peace. Mm-hmm. And so that is actually the North Korean line that we've heard for a long time, which is that they want peace on the peninsula, which means U.S. troops off of the peninsula, right. And for the U.S. to remove its security umbrella over South Korea. And that is highly unlikely. So I'm not sure that policy-wise things have really changed here, but there is a lot more diplomacy happening.
Right, for sure. Now, for each of the four major countries invested in the Korean Peninsula, there are probably slight differences in how each country would define a successful inter-Korean summit. What are some outcomes of the Moon Kim summit that would benefit the parties?
Of course, hopefully some step to the denuclearization, but also the Korean stability on Korean Peninsula is good for all of the neighboring countries. Last year, there was spreading rumor that some kind of war might happen, and that's because of that many Japanese tourists stopped coming to South Korea, and it's not a good thing. So, the peace and stability is very good for all of us.
Uh-huh. Are there any specific outcomes that would benefit Russia aside from denuclearization?
As Koichi have mentioned, bringing stability, additional stability to Korean Peninsula could help develop Russia's Far East. Mm-hmm. And Russian government is currently concentrating and working hard to do that, considering the relations with the West. So Russia hopes that to attract more investment to the Far East, and of course settling the North Korean nuclear issue would play a certain role in that. Right, that would help to bring the money to Russia.
Right. Then conversely, what do you think Pyongyang wants the most from the regional powers?
Well, not only for the regime to stay in power, but also for the regime to be seen as an equal with the rest of the world, which it certainly is getting, right? I mean, Kim Jong-un was the one, he's been kind of leading the way here. He was the one who unlocked all of this diplomacy by, in his New Year's speech, striking this conciliatory tone. As a result, everybody else, all the rest of the countries have jumped, including the huge country, China, and the United States. And so Kim is really sort of conducting and calling the shots here in a way that I think punches way above its weight. I mean, this is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's tiny compared to the rest of the countries that they're dealing with, and yet they're playing diplomatically almost on the same level. They're getting these sort of face-to-face meetings in the way that he got with Xi Jinping. He got this whole treatment, banquet dinner, and all of this stuff. And so Pyongyang, you could say that this achievement in and of itself is what Pyongyang wants.
Right, so they probably already got what they wanted.
Got what they wanted in a lot of ways.
All right. Now, in the recent flurry of diplomacy surrounding North Korea, the regional powers have also been busy planning summits of their own with each other. So who wants to meet who and what's on the table? Let's take a look. The situation on the Korean Peninsula is revolving rapidly as the third Inter-Korean summit starts to take place, with the Washington-Pyongyang summit also on the calendar. A series of future summits between regional powers such as South Korea, the United States, Japan, and China are expected to follow. A meeting between President Moon Jae-in and Donald Trump could also be sandwiched in between the Inter-Korean and Washington-Pyongyang summits. The two leaders are expected to further discuss the exchanges that take place during this whole Pyongyang meeting. In addition to the Inter-Korean and Washington-Pyongyang summits, a trilateral summit between the two Koreas and the United States is also being raised as a possibility.
진전 상황에 따라서는 남북미 3국 정상회담으로 이어질 수도 있을 것입니다. 이번 회담들과 앞으로 이어질 회담들을 통해 우리는 한반도의 핵과 평화 문제를 완전히 끝내야 합니다.
A summit between Seoul and Beijing, as well as Seoul and Tokyo, are also being forecast to take place in the near future.
두 정상은 한중일 3국 정상회담을 가급적 이른 시기에 개최한다는 데 뜻을 모았습니다.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has taken a step forward onto the global diplomatic stage following his meeting with the South Korean envoy. Starting with the Inter-Korean summit, Kim Jong-un could also arrange further meetings with the leaders of Japan and Russia. In response to these overtures, Japan has dropped its traditionally hardline stance on North Korea to discuss the possibility of a summit meeting between Tokyo and Pyongyang.
我が国としては日米韓3カ国が連携のもとに核ミサイル拉致問題の包括的な解決に向けてですね取り組みを進めていく。
There could also be a revival of six-party talks for the first time in 10 years, given the need for multilateral cooperation over North Korea's nuclear issue. All eyes across the globe are focused on the outcome of these summits, with world leaders expected to hold a succession of meetings, starting with face-to-face talks between President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So a series of high-level talks and summits are planned. As journalists, how are you planning to cover all these major events?
Well, it's certainly going to take a lot of effort and take some sleepless nights. Just recently, I had a phone call from my headquarters in Moscow, and they're going to send in a team of, like a reinforcement team of journalists from China and Japan to help me cover this summit.
But the Inter-Korean summit?
Yeah, we're talking about the Inter-Korean summit. And possibly if the North and American summit would happen somewhere nearby, I'm certainly going there too. I think it's not decided yet where it's going to take place, and everybody's speculating whether that would be Beijing or Vladivostok or maybe even Da Nang in Vietnam. So anyway, I'm packing my my things and getting ready to travel.
Okay. Have they sent reinforcements from NPR?
Well, that would certainly happen for an American North Korean summit. Our White House team often travels with the president, and so there would likely be a White House reporter and White House producer that would join for that. As for the Inter-Korean summit, like I mentioned earlier in the program, there's not a lot of American attention on the North-South summit, despite its importance.
Right.
And so, as a result, I might be on my own for that, which is actually possible because it is so restricted when it comes to coverage, especially for foreign media, that we would likely be in Seoul trying to cover it from some unification ministry press briefing room and not actually up close near the Peace House itself.
Okay. Now, of the numerous summits that are probably planned post-Moon-Kim summit, which one are you looking forward to the most?
Still, Trump-Kim summit is the most important summit, but...
Not Abe-Kim?
Well, that would be an interesting topic for Japanese journalists, but the importance is, of course, even from our perspective, Trump-Kim summit is more important.
So speaking of Abe-Kim summit, what's the likelihood, how do you rate the possibility of a Pyongyang-Moscow summit taking place in the near future?
I do not think that Pyongyang and Moscow have really any outstanding issues that have to be discussed at the summit. But I do not rule out the possibility of a trilateral summit of North, South, and Russia.
Okay.
It would really have some sense to organize and to discuss, since the three countries have many trilateral projects that could be realized if all the countries agree and if North Korean issue is solved. like the oil or gas pipeline going through North Korea to the south, and the electric power lines going through North Korea to the south, etc.
Right, the transportation line is also another huge one.
Yeah,
that could
right.
be discussed.
The railroads. Yeah.
So Koichi, this next question is for you. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he is seeking to meet Trump before the inter-Korean meeting, the inter-Korean summit. Why do you think he's so insistent on meeting Trump before the Moon-Kim summit?
Currently, this North Korean issue and nuclear issue is going on with conduction of South Korea and then North Korea and US, China. So, of course, Prime Minister Abe wants to cut in and show their point of view.
Right.
And the most effective way is to speak with President Trump and how Japan think about this nuclear issue.
Now, some pundits say that President Shinzo Abe is also seeking a summit with Kim Jong-un, partly as a way to divert attention away from this recent school scandal. Do you agree with that suggestion?
This school scandal is a very interesting topic for Japanese reporter, and then I myself are also eagerly watching how much his support rate will drop or something like that. But I think it's a bit different topic, because if Prime Minister Abe suddenly start talking about dialogue, then it is, about political motivation. But this North Korea issue and abduction issue has been the #1 priority since 2004 or 2005 for Prime Minister Abe. And in 2014, under the Abe administration, Japan and North Korea had a Stockholm Agreement about abduction issue. And the process stopped in 2016 because of their North Korean nuclear test. So theoretically, if this denuclearization dialogue goes well with US and South Korea and China, then naturally Japan-North Korea dialogue can be resumed.
Right. Do you think if the abduction issue was addressed properly, that his popularity would have a significant increase?
Yeah, they're very important issue for Japanese people. So it's really hard, but if they reach some agreement, then it will help
boost his popularity back up. All right. How do you rate the possibility of a trilateral Moon-Kim-Trump summit?
It might be necessary, but right now I rate the likelihood that a summit between the U.S. and North Korea happening by May to be very, very low. Not only are there constant changes, the basic details of the summit haven't even been lined up. That is, where is it going to happen? What are they going to talk about? And so until those basic details actually get agreed upon, I'm going to be very skeptical that a bilateral summit could happen at all, to say nothing of a trilateral one.
Okay.
I'm wondering why President Moon, when he mentioned about this trilateral summit, he forgot mention about China.
No, I think you were going to say forgot Japan.
Logically speaking, China, South Korea, North Korea, US summit is more effective to solve the center issue of the nuclear and economical relationship.
Okay, so the next question is, do you think it's possible for North Korea to establish formal diplomatic ties with the regional powers in the near future?
I think so. Why not? If everything goes smoothly, if North Korea would be ready, if it would really show its desire to denuclearize, then why not?
Do you think it's possible in the near future?
It depends on what we're saying near future is, but if near future is in the next year or so, I would say no. But then again, stranger things have happened, so real life is unpredictable.
I'm still quite pessimistic, but these 3 months, I couldn't foresee all the happenings, so maybe something really good might happen.
Okay. Now, in addition to acting as a significant moment for the two countries, it appears that the Inter-Korean Summit will also act as a starting point for a series of summits between the neighboring countries. And with that, it's our hope that the third Inter-Korean Summit will act as a door to peace for the world at large. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.